Snow drifted across the silent highway of Silver Ridge when a patrol truck slowed to a stop. In the pale glow of its headlights, an old tire lay half buried in the snow, and beside it, a German shepherd scarred and motionless, her body curled around two trembling puppies. The man stepped into the blizzard, boots sinking deep, wind howling like voices from another time. When his gloved hands brushed the snow from her fur, he realized she wasn't just protecting them. She had been waiting beneath that tire, as if guarding the last spark of life she had left. What happens next will break your heart and mend it again. Before we begin, please subscribe, leave a like, and share this story. Your kindness keeps hope alive. A pale sun hung above the frozen valley of Silver Ridge, Colorado, its light weak and fading beneath the weight of a coming blizzard. Wind swept over the highway in shrill, uneven gusts, dragging veils of snow across the asphalt. The world was nothing but white breath and silence. Deputy Nathan Hale, 44, guided his patrol truck along the deserted road, the tires humming over ice. His face, framed by days of unshaven stubble, was the kind of face that had once smiled easily but had since forgotten how. Deep lines traced his forehead, marks left not by age alone, but by memories he refused to revisit. The small silver ring on his right hand caught the dashboard light. It had belonged to his late wife, Emily, and he still wore it as if holding on to a ghost. Nathan was a man built like the mountains that surrounded the town, broad, enduring, and often mistaken for stoic when, in truth, he was simply tired. Tired of noise. Tired of the silence that followed it. The storm had begun earlier than forecasted, rolling down from the peaks like a wall of cold iron. His radio hissed, caught in static, as he passed the turn toward the old quarry. Somewhere beneath that static, a voice called his name. A hallucination, perhaps, born of long nights and unhealed grief. He shut the radio off, the cab returning to its usual quiet hum. The snow deepened quickly, smothering the guardrails, the road edges, even the signs. Nathan slowed to a crawl. Visibility was collapsing, 30 feet, then 20. His wipers beat a desperate rhythm against the glass. Out here, in this kind of cold, even sound froze. Yet, beneath the hiss of the storm, a dull thud echoed once, faint but distinct like something heavy striking metal. He frowned and eased the truck to the shoulder. Red and blue lights flared briefly against the white wall. When he stepped out, the wind hit him like a wall of knives. Snow clawed at his coat and stung his eyes. He pulled up the collar of his thick navy jacket, the sheriff's patch half covered in frost, and moved toward the sound. That was when he saw it, a lone tire lying sideways near the ditch, half buried in drifts. It spun slowly, pushed by the wind, squealing softly. But what caught his eye wasn't the tire. It was what lay beside it. At first glance, he thought it was just a mound of snow. Then the mound moved. A faint whimper carried through the storm. Nathan dropped to one knee, brushing the snow away with his gloved hands, and froze. It was a German shepherd, adult, female, her fur clumped with ice and streaked with blood. She was curled tightly around two tiny puppies, shielding them beneath her body. Her breathing was ragged. Her ribs showed through the frost-matted coat. One ear was torn. The puppies pressed into her chest, their whines thin and desperate, their fur the pale beige of newborns barely 6 weeks old. One trembled so violently, Nathan thought it would break. "Hey, easy, girl," he whispered, his breath turning to mist. "It's okay now." The dog opened her eyes. They were a deep amber, filled not with fear, but with the exhausted calm of something that had already accepted pain. That look went straight through him. For a heartbeat, he saw himself reflected there. Someone still breathing only because stopping wasn't an option. Nathan shrugged off his jacket and wrapped the three animals as best he could. The cold bit into his arms immediately. The mother dog whimpered but did not resist. Her paw twitched over the smallest pup, refusing to let go even as Nathan lifted them into his coat. "You're all right," he murmured, voice breaking slightly. "I've got you." As he carried them back to the truck, the blizzard howled louder, drowning out his footsteps. He placed the dogs on the passenger seat, turned the heater to its highest setting, and sat there a moment, hands shaking from both cold and something deeper. The dashboard light glowed over the mother dog's muzzle, showing faint scars crisscrossing her neck. Thin, deliberate, surgical. He'd seen that kind of mark once before, years ago, on a retired K9 left behind after a military operation went wrong. The puppy nearest to him sneezed weakly, its nose twitching. The second was still. Nathan pressed a hand over its tiny chest. It rose, barely. Relief hit him so hard his eyes stung. "Hang on, little one. Hang on." The drive back to the substation was a blur of headlights and snow ghosts. Nathan gripped the wheel so tightly that his knuckles ached. The heater roared, filling the cab with hot, dry air. The mother dog's breathing steadied, her body curling tighter around the pups. Nathan caught himself glancing over again and again, as if afraid they'd vanish if he looked away. The storm outside roared like a living thing, slamming against the truck, shaking it with invisible hands. Nathan's mind slipped backward, to a night 3 winters ago, another storm, another road. Emily's car had skidded off an icy bridge before help could reach her. They'd found the wreck at dawn. He remembered the headlights still burning beneath the snow, the engine idling like a heart that refused to die. That night had never left him. Now, staring at the mother dog, he felt the same helplessness, but also, for the first time in years, a spark of purpose. Maybe saving her wouldn't change the past, but maybe it would change something in him. When Nathan finally pulled into the Silver Ridge substation, the clock on the dash read 12:43 a.m. The building was half lit, its floodlights buried under layers of frost. He parked inside the garage bay, the door groaning shut behind him, and exhaled in relief as silence returned. Thick, heavy, sacred silence. He gathered the dogs gently into his arms. The mother's fur was coarse and smelled faintly of iron. The puppies clung to her belly, eyes still shut tight. As Nathan crossed the concrete floor, his boots left dark, wet prints behind him. He laid them down on an old wool blanket near the heater and crouched beside them. Steam rose faintly from their bodies as warmth began to seep in. He sat there a long time, watching their chests rise and fall. The storm outside raged on, but inside, something softened. For the first time in years, the emptiness inside him didn't echo. It was filled with breath, fragile but alive. Nathan reached out and brushed a flake of snow from the dog's ear. "Welcome to Silver Ridge," he whispered. Outside, the wind wailed through the eaves, scraping against the tin roof like the whisper of something ancient. The town slept beneath its blanket of snow, unaware that within its quiet heart, 3 lives and 1 weary man had just crossed paths, and none of them would ever be the same again. By the time dawn crept across the mountains, the storm had not yet broken. Snow continued to fall in soft, ceaseless waves, blanketing Silver Ridge in ghostly white. Inside the substation, the air was thick with the smell of damp fur and thawing frost. Deputy Nathan Hale hadn't slept. He sat on the cold floor beside the space heater, his elbows resting on his knees, watching the German shepherd and her pups breathe. The mother had stopped shivering, though her sides still rose unevenly. Every few seconds she let out a faint groan, low and fragile, but alive. One of the pups, the pale one, had buried its nose into her neck. The darker one, smaller and restless, twitched in its sleep as if still fighting the wind. Nathan rubbed his face, trying to push away the heaviness that clung to his chest. He needed help, someone who knew what they were doing. He reached for the landline, dialed the only name that came to mind. The phone rang twice before a woman's voice answered, slightly hoarse with sleep but composed. "Silver Ridge Veterinary," she said. Nathan's voice was low. "Dr. McConnell, it's Deputy Hale. Sorry to call this early, but I've got 3 dogs here. 1 adult, badly hurt. 2 pups. I don't think they'll last long without you." A pause, then the rustle of sheets. "How far out?" she asked. "At the substation, near the main highway?" "Give me 15 minutes," she replied, and the line went dead. Exactly 13 minutes later, headlights appeared through the swirling snow. Nathan rose as the side door burst open and a figure stepped inside, shaking off the storm like it was something she'd trained to endure. Dr. Grace McConnell, 36, was tall and slim, her movements precise but unhurried. Her auburn hair was tied back in a loose braid that had half unraveled, and her face bore that calm intensity of someone who'd learned to think fast when others panicked. She wore a thick olive parka over faded jeans tucked into scuffed brown boots. Her eyes, steel gray with flecks of green, seemed to register everything at once: the half-frozen animals, the overturned coffee cup, Nathan's unshaven exhaustion. "Show me," she said simply. Nathan led her to the blanket by the heater. Grace knelt, her breath fogging in the chill, and began her work without hesitation. She checked the mother's gums, pressed gently along her ribs, her gloved hands steady and sure. "Severe hypothermia," she murmured. "Dehydration, old scar tissue here, and these." She peeled back the fur near the neck and stopped. A faint glint of metal caught the light. Nathan crouched beside her. "What is that?" Grace didn't answer immediately. She reached into her bag, pulled out tweezers, and extracted a small, flat fragment, a metallic tag no larger than a thumbnail. It was fused to the skin by scar tissue, engraved with faint, worn letters. Unit K9 47, Guardian Division. Nathan frowned. "Military?" Grace nodded slowly, her jaw tightening. "Looks like it. Guardian Division was part of a K9 program, years back." She didn't look at him when she added, "classified work, joint operations with private contractors. It shouldn't exist anymore." Her tone was clipped, controlled, but Nathan noticed how her hands had begun to tremble. For a brief moment, the silence between them was filled only by the wind pressing against the windows. Then Grace exhaled, her voice softer. "She's been through hell. Whoever trained her." Nathan studied her. "You sound like you've seen that kind of thing before." Grace's lips tightened into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I have. I used to stitch them up. Soldiers, handlers, dogs, out in places where bullets didn't care who they found." She reached for a syringe, drawing clear liquid into it. "2 tours overseas. I left the service 5 years ago. Thought I'd find peace somewhere quieter." Her gaze flicked around the empty station. "Didn't expect to find a war survivor waiting under a tire." Nathan helped her lift the dog onto a makeshift table. The animal barely stirred, but when Grace injected the warmed fluids and pain relief, a soft whine escaped her throat. "There you go, girl," Grace murmured. "Stay with us." Her hands moved with quiet precision, cleaning, stitching, bandaging. The pups whimpered nearby, and Grace motioned for Nathan to hold them close to the heater. He did, awkwardly but gently. "You're good with them," she said without looking up. He snorted. "First time I've been told that about anyone, human or otherwise." An hour passed before the storm began to ease, the wind's fury replaced by the slow patter of melting ice sliding down the windows. Grace finished her last stitch and exhaled deeply. She'll need warmth, food, and time. The pups should be fine. Nathan watched the dog's chest rise more evenly now. "Do you think she was abandoned?" he asked. Grace hesitated. "Maybe. Or maybe someone didn't want to be found." When she finally looked at him, there was something guarded in her expression. Nathan recognized it instantly. It was the look of someone who'd seen too much and trusted too little. "You said Guardian Division was shut down," he pressed. "So how the hell does a tagged dog end up freezing to death outside our town?" Grace removed her gloves and rubbed her hands together. "That's what scares me," she said. "Programs like that don't die. They just change names." Nathan leaned back against the table, watching the mother dog, Luna, he decided she should be called, shift slightly, her paw twitching toward the pups. "Luna," he murmured. "It means moon. She deserves something peaceful." Grace glanced up at him. "Luna," she repeated, the word soft on her tongue. "Yeah, that fits." She rose, stretching her stiff back. "You should rest, Deputy." "You, too," he said. She gave a faint smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Rest is for people who stop running." Nathan wanted to ask what she was running from, but she was already at the door, zipping her coat, pulling up her hood. "You'll call if anything changes?" she asked. "Of course." Grace nodded once and stepped out into the storm. The wind caught her braid as she disappeared into the swirling white. For a long while after she was gone, Nathan just stood there, listening to the heater hum and the faint sound of breathing behind him. Later, when he went to check on Luna, he noticed something he hadn't before. Along her left hind leg beneath a patch of trimmed fur was a faint series of numbers tattooed in black ink, not part of any civilian ID system he knew. His gut tightened. He wrote the sequence down in his notepad, meaning to ask Grace about it later. That night, as the storm finally began to die and the first stars broke through the thinning clouds, Nathan sat beside the sleeping dogs. Luna's breathing was steady now. The pups nestled close, warm and dreaming. He reached out, resting his hand on her shoulder, and for the first time since Emily's death, he whispered a prayer, not for himself, but for something innocent he might still be able to protect. Outside, the snow reflected the moonlight in silver ripples. The world washed clean, but somewhere far beyond the mountains another storm was waiting. Morning came reluctantly to Silver Ridge, dragging its pale light through the remnants of the storm. Snow lay heavy on the eaves of the substation, soft as ash after a fire. Inside, the world was hushed except for the faint hum of the heater and the quiet breathing of 3 sleeping dogs. Deputy Nathan Hale poured himself stale coffee and stared out the frosted window. He hadn't slept more than 2 hours. His eyes were red-rimmed, his jaw shadowed by a day's worth of stubble, yet his mind was alert, turning over the questions that had kept him awake. Unit K9-47, Guardian Division. The words had looped through his head like a song he didn't want to remember. He stepped outside to clear his thoughts, boots crunching over the new snow. The air smelled clean, metallic, sharp with cold. But near the road, something caught his attention. A series of tire tracks, deep and fresh, cutting across the untouched blanket of white. They weren't from his truck. The pattern was wider, heavier, commercial, maybe SUV grade, and recent. Nathan crouched, brushing snow from the grooves, tracing their direction. They led toward the stretch of highway where he'd found Luna and her pups. His stomach tightened. Whoever had left them there might have come back. He followed the prints for 30 yards before they vanished into the woods. Nearby, half buried under a mound of snow, he spotted a small black object, no bigger than a bird. He pulled it free, brushing the ice off to reveal a drone. Its rotors bent, lights shattered, still warm to the touch. Nathan carried it inside and set it on the table beside his mug. The drone's casing bore no brand name, only a faint silver emblem. 3 interlocking triangles. "That's not hobby gear," he muttered. "Somebody's watching." He turned it over in his hands, inspecting the camera lens, now cracked but faintly blinking red. Whatever it had recorded was probably still stored inside. He didn't have the tools to extract data, but he knew someone who might. He reached for the phone and dialed Grace McConnell's number. When Grace arrived 20 minutes later, the wind carried the scent of antiseptic and pine into the substation with her. She looked more awake than he felt, her hair tied up neatly this time, the faintest trace of fatigue hidden beneath her professional calm. You sound like you've been up all night, she said as she stepped in, shaking off her parka. I have, Nathan replied. Found something. He gestured toward the drone. Grace's gaze sharpened. Military issue? Could be, he said. You tell me. She picked it up, examined the emblem, and exhaled slowly. That's not standard government hardware. This belongs to a private contractor. I've seen this logo before. Genex Tech. Nathan frowned. Genex Tech? The biotech company out of Denver? They went under years ago. Officially, Grace said, running a hand through her hair. Unofficially, they kept funding black projects. Neural mapping, bioenhancements, emotional conditioning. Most of it involved dogs. They called it Project Guardian. I thought it was dismantled after what happened in Nevada. Nathan studied her face. You were there, weren't you? She hesitated, her jaw tightening. I was a consultant, field medic. We were told it was a rescue initiative. It wasn't. She moved to Luna, who was now sitting up weakly, her amber eyes tracking every motion in the room. Grace knelt and gently ran a handheld scanner over the dog's neck. A faint electronic pulse answered with a sharp beep. There it is, Grace murmured. An implant, neural interface deep in the tissue. This isn't just an ID chip. It's transmitting something. Nathan leaned closer. Transmitting? To where? To whoever put it there. She continued scanning, then moved to the pups. Each emitted the same low beep. They've been tagged, too, she said quietly. Nathan's expression hardened. So, someone dumped them out here after realizing they'd been compromised? Grace shook her head. Or someone wanted them to be found. She retrieved a small portable device from her medical kit, linking it to the scanner. The data that appeared on the tiny screen made her go pale. These chips are not passive. They're neurological amplifiers. They connect directly to the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain. They were designed to manipulate instinct, loyalty, aggression, fear, attachment. It's banned technology. Whoever's doing this isn't training dogs. They're rewriting them. Nathan's jaw tightened. That's monstrous. Grace stood, her hands trembling slightly as she closed her kit. You don't know the half of it. The Guardian Division was meant to create dogs that could form unbreakable emotional bonds with assigned targets. Children, soldiers, civilians. They'd protect them at any cost. But something went wrong. The dogs became unstable. They'd defend one life and destroy everything else around them to do it. The silence in the room deepened. Luna shifted restlessly, her paw drumming softly against the floor, as if reacting to Grace's words. Nathan knelt beside her, his voice low. You're safe now, girl. No one's using you anymore. Luna looked at him with those burning amber eyes, intelligent, alert, as though she understood. Grace leaned against the counter, exhaling. If Genex Tech is back, this town's not as quiet as it looks. They'll come for her. For all of them. Nathan met her gaze. Then they'll have to go through me. A knock on the door startled them both. Nathan moved cautiously to the entrance, hand hovering near his holster. When he opened it, Sheriff Dale Hargrove stood there, his parka dusted with snow, a steaming thermos in hand. Hargrove was in his late 50s, broad-shouldered with a weathered face and eyes the color of steel. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, but his gaze carried the weight of someone who'd seen more than he'd ever tell. Heard you pulled a long night, he said gruffly, stepping inside. Word is you picked up some strays. Nathan forced a small smile. Yeah, something like that. Hargrove crouched to study Luna and the pups, his movements careful but curious. Fine animals. You planning to keep them? Haven't thought that far, Nathan replied. Grace's expression was unreadable as she quietly packed her gear. Hargrove noticed the drone on the table. You picking up toys now? He asked. Nathan handed it over. Found it near the road where I found the dogs. Any chance you can run it through evidence for a serial number? Hargrove turned it over in his calloused hands. This ain't any model, I know, but I'll see what I can do." He gave Nathan a long look. "Try not to get yourself buried in another storm, son. This town's had enough ghosts." When the sheriff left, Grace finally broke the silence. "You trust him?" Nathan hesitated. "I trust he wants the town safe. Beyond that, I don't know." Grace zipped her coat, eyes distant. "Then don't show him everything. Keep Luna somewhere they won't find her. I'll run a full analysis tonight." She turned to leave, pausing at the door. "Be careful, Nathan. Genex Tech doesn't lose what it owns." After she left, the station felt heavier, the air thick with the scent of antiseptic and unease. Nathan looked at the dogs, the fragile family that had fallen into his hands by chance or fate, and knew that whatever had brought them here wasn't finished. He stared at the broken drone, its red light blinking faintly like a dying heartbeat, and felt that echo of the past reverberate deep in his bones. Somewhere, someone was watching and waiting. Outside, snow began to fall again, quiet and deceptive, covering the tire tracks, erasing every trace of the night before. But Nathan knew the truth. Some tracks don't disappear. They only lead deeper. The storm had passed, but Silver Ridge remained wrapped in a pale stillness, as if the world had stopped to take a breath. The trees wore crowns of snow, bending under the weight, and the air smelled of pine and cold metal. Deputy Nathan Hale stood on the porch of the substation, mug in hand, eyes narrowed toward the white horizon. He hadn't yet shaken off the conversation with Grace or the sheriff's uneasy visit. The name Genex Tech still echoed in his thoughts like a bad omen. Inside, Luna rested on a blanket near the heater, her bandaged leg moving slightly each time one of her pups squeaked. Scout, the lighter of the two, had begun to toddle about curiously, while Ash, the smaller, darker one, stayed pressed against Luna's side as though afraid the world might still hurt him. Nathan watched them and felt something unspoken settle in his chest. A quiet determination, the kind that comes from realizing you've already chosen a side without meaning to. The silence broke when the police radio crackled to life. "All units, report of a missing child, male, 8 years old. Name, Daniel Carter. Last seen with his father near Timberline Ridge. Search teams en route." Nathan froze, the name slicing through the calm. He grabbed his coat, holster, and radio. As he prepared to leave, Luna suddenly stood, ears pricking, head tilting toward the door. Her eyes fixed on him with uncanny focus, and for a moment, Nathan thought she understood exactly what had been said. "No," he muttered, shaking his head. "You're not ready." But Luna let out a sharp bark, once, twice, low and commanding. Scout joined in, tail stiff, whining toward the door. Moments later, Grace arrived in her dark green SUV, stepping out with a thermos in one hand and a medical pack slung over her shoulder. Her auburn hair was tied back in a messy bun, strands of it escaping to brush against her sharp cheekbones. She wore a heavy navy coat and snow pants tucked into worn hiking boots. Her breath fogged in the morning chill. "Heard the call," she said, eyes scanning Nathan's face. "I'm coming." Nathan hesitated only a second before nodding. "Luna wants to go." Grace glanced at the dog who stood poised near the door, tail straight, muscles tense. "She's not fully healed." "Try telling her that," Nathan replied. Grace's lips twitched in a wry, resigned smile. "Fine, but if she collapses, that's on you." They loaded up in Nathan's patrol truck, Luna and the 2 pups in the back seat. The radio continued to chatter updates as they drove north, the road narrowing into a tunnel of white trees. Grace scrolled through her phone, tracking the search grid. The boy's father, Mark Carter, early 40s, local mechanic, was found unconscious near a frozen stream, she said. Broken leg, hypothermic. Said they were tracking a deer when the ice gave way under his son. No sign of the boy since. Nathan's grip tightened on the wheel. "How long has he been missing?" "About 6 hours." Grace looked up. "If he's alive, He's running out of time." When they reached Timberline Ridge, the place looked like a battlefield frozen mid-breath. Search vehicles were parked in haphazard lines, their lights flashing weakly through the fog. Volunteers in bright jackets combed the area, their voices muted by the snow. Among them, Sergeant Kyle Doran, head of the county search team, approached. Doran was a broad-shouldered man in his mid-30s, clean-shaven with dark hair slicked under a beanie. His eyes were sharp but kind, the kind of man who carried the weight of every life he couldn't save. "Hail," he greeted, extending a gloved hand. "Didn't expect to see you here this quick." Nathan shook his hand. "I was nearby. What's the status?" Doran sighed, his breath misting. "We've covered 2 miles south of the ridge. Nothing yet. The father says the boy was wearing a red parka, blue mittens. Temps are dropping again soon." As the men spoke, Luna jumped down from the truck, nose twitching in the cold air. Scout and Ash followed, slipping slightly on the ice. "Careful," Grace called, hurrying to gather them, but Luna had already started pacing, sniffing along the ground, her movements purposeful. "She's scenting something," Nathan said. Doran looked skeptical. "You're trusting an injured stray over trained dogs." "She's not just a stray," Nathan replied quietly. Doran raised an eyebrow but said nothing as Luna stopped, nose buried in a patch of disturbed snow, then looked back at Nathan with a sharp bark. "Guess that's a yes," he muttered. Nathan fell in step beside her, Grace and Doran following. The others trailed behind with searchlights and radios. Luna moved quickly, her tail stiff, body low, every muscle tuned to a rhythm only she could hear. Scout and Ash followed close, yipping softly whenever she paused. The trail led them deeper into the woods, where the trees grew denser and the snow thicker. The wind carried faint echoes, the distant creak of branches, the soft hum of something mechanical. "Hold up," Doran said, pointing ahead. "You hear that?" A faint metallic groan came from beyond a small ridge. They pushed through the brush and froze. Half buried in snow lay a green Jeep Wrangler, overturned on its side, windshield shattered. Steam hissed faintly from the hood, already freezing mid-air. Nathan's flashlight swept over the wreck until it caught a flash of color, red fabric, wedged beneath the crumpled passenger door. His heart kicked. "There!" he shouted. Grace was already moving, kneeling beside the wreck. "It's him!" she called. Daniel Carter was trapped inside, one arm pinned between the seat and the console. His face was pale, lips blue, breath shallow but present. "He's alive," Grace whispered, her voice trembling. Nathan and Doran moved quickly, prying open the door with a crowbar. The hinges screamed in protest before giving way. Grace crawled halfway inside, checking the boy's vitals. "Pulse weak, body temp dropping fast. We need to get him warm now." But before she could pull him free, Luna darted forward. Ignoring Grace's shouts, the German shepherd slipped through the narrow opening and pressed herself against the boy. She licked his cheek once, twice, whining softly. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Daniel's eyelids fluttered. A rasping breath escaped his lips, and his small hand rose weakly to touch Luna's head. "Doggy," he murmured. Grace exhaled, half laughing, half crying. "You're safe, sweetheart. Stay awake." Together they lifted the boy out, wrapping him in Grace's thermal blanket. Nathan carried him toward the waiting snowcat as medics rushed to meet them. Behind them, Luna sat in the snow, watching silently as the boy was loaded into the vehicle. Scout and Ash huddled beside her, their tiny bodies pressed against her leg. The rescue lights painted the snow in streaks of red and blue, and for an instant Nathan could have sworn the dog's eyes reflected both colors, like a signal, a pulse from something greater than instinct. As the convoy departed toward town, Nathan stood beside Grace, the cold wind biting through his coat. "She found him when no one else could," he said quietly. Grace nodded, still staring after Luna. "Because she was meant to," she whispered. "They built her to protect. But maybe—" She looked at Nathan, her expression softening. "Maybe she chose to." Nathan said nothing, only reached down to pat Luna's head. The dog leaned into his touch, tail flicking once. Somewhere far off, thunder rumbled faintly beneath the clouds, like the echo of something unfinished. Evening crept over Silver Ridge like ink spilled across snow. The town was still buzzing about the rescue. The boy, Daniel Carter, alive and safe. News traveled fast in small places. Reporters from Bozeman had already called the sheriff's office, and people at the diner spoke the words "hero dog" with reverence. Nathan should have felt proud. Instead, unease gnawed at him. Something about the rescue didn't sit right. Luna had led them straight to the crash site, as if she'd known before anyone else where to look. Instinct, maybe, or something darker, something programmed. He stood by the substation window, watching the snow drift against the glass, his reflection faintly ghosted in the pane. In the corner of the room, Scout slept curled up near the heater, twitching in a dream. Luna lay beside him, breathing slow, her ribs still rising unevenly. Ash had climbed halfway onto her back, tiny paws draped across her neck. The sight should have been peaceful. It wasn't. When Grace arrived, the faint hum of her truck broke the quiet. She stepped inside with her usual calm precision. Olive parka zipped high, cheeks red from the cold, eyes sharper than ever. "Daniel's stable," she said, setting her gloves on the desk. "Hospital says he'll make a full recovery. They want to meet the angel dog who saved him." Nathan smiled faintly. She deserves that title. Grace didn't smile back. She also deserves protection. If Genix Tech is monitoring this area, that rescue might have painted a target on her. Nathan frowned. "You think they're still watching?" "I don't think," Grace said quietly. "I know." At that moment, the radio on Nathan's desk crackled. Static. Then a voice, Sheriff Hargrove's, cut through, strained, fragmented. "Units, possible trespassers, North Ridge, report if—" Then silence. Nathan adjusted the dial. "Sheriff, repeat." Nothing, just white noise. He grabbed his coat. "I'm going up there." Grace stepped forward. "You shouldn't go alone." "I'm not," he said, glancing at Luna. The dog lifted her head, eyes glinting in the dim light as if she'd been waiting for the call. They drove north, headlights slicing through the mist. The ridge loomed ahead, a jagged silhouette against a bruised sky. When they reached the tree line, Nathan cut the engine. "See that?" Grace whispered, pointing. On the far slope, half hidden by pines, was a black SUV, its engine idling faintly, exhaust curling into the cold air. Its windows were tinted, the plates covered with mud. No movement, no lights, just the sound of the wind and the faint hum of the vehicle. "That's no hiker's truck," Nathan muttered. He reached for his binoculars, adjusting the focus. Through the lens, he caught a glimpse of someone in the driver's seat. A tall man with close-cropped blonde hair, a rigid posture, and a faint scar tracing from temple to jaw. The man was speaking into a headset, nodding slowly, then glancing directly toward Nathan's direction. "He sees us," Nathan said. But before they could react, the SUV shifted into gear and vanished down the slope, tires throwing up snow like smoke. When they returned to the substation, Nathan called Hargrove. No answer. He tried again. Still nothing. Grace's face was pale, her expression drawn. "They're cutting communication lines," she said softly. "Standard procedure before retrieval." "Retrieval?" Nathan repeated. "For what?" "For her," Grace whispered, eyes flicking toward Luna. "Project K947, Guardian Division. They'll come to reclaim what they think they own." As if on cue, her phone buzzed. The caller ID read, "Private, unknown." Grace hesitated, then answered. "McConnell." A male voice spoke on the other end, low and urgent. "Grace, it's Ethan Rowe. You remember me?" Her face shifted, shock, then caution. "Ethan? After all these years?" Nathan watched her closely. Ethan's voice continued, crisp but strained. "Listen, I don't have long. Genix Tech's mobilizing a recovery team. They've flagged your town. Silver Ridge. They want the dog, the one tagged K947. You have to move her. Tonight." Grace's knuckles whitened around the phone. "How do you know this?" "Because I helped build the damn program," Ethan said bitterly. "And now they're erasing the evidence." Nathan stepped closer. "Can they trace this call?" Ethan's tone hardened. "They can trace everything. I burned my credentials to warn you. 2 operatives, Victor Hale and a new field handler named Riley Knox, are heading your way. Knox is ex-Delta Force, doesn't miss shots, doesn't ask questions. If they get to that dog, it's over." Static hissed. The line wavered. "Grace, if you still believe in what we started, save her. Don't let them finish this." Then the call cut dead. Grace lowered the phone slowly, her face unreadable. "Ethan was my superior back then," she said quietly. "Brilliant, idealistic, until Genextech turned the project into something else. He disappeared after the shutdown. I thought he was dead." Nathan studied her. "You trust him?" "Enough to be afraid," she murmured. Night fell fast. Snow returned, thin flakes swirling like ghosts around the lamplight. Nathan double-checked the station locks, his mind restless. He'd moved Luna and the pups into the holding room, lined it with blankets and a space heater. The dogs were calm, unaware of the storm gathering beyond the walls. Grace brewed coffee in the corner, her movements mechanical. "We should relocate them," she said. "Take them out of town before—" The power flickered, once, twice, then went out completely. The hum of the heater died. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Luna's head snapped up, ears pricked, body rigid. Scout whimpered. From outside came the faint crunch of snow beneath. Boots, measured, deliberate. Nathan drew his sidearm and moved toward the door, signaling Grace to stay behind. Through the frosted window he saw 2 figures approaching, one tall and broad, the other leaner, both dressed in black tactical gear. Their movements were silent, precise. "They're here," he whispered. The first figure raised a hand device. A small dart hissed through the air, striking the door frame. A faint vapor spread, burning Nathan's eyes. He stumbled back, coughing. Grace pulled her scarf over her mouth, shouting, "Gas!" She grabbed Luna's leash, trying to move the dogs, but before she could, the door exploded inward with a metallic crack. A blinding flashlight beam cut through the haze. "Stay down," a voice barked. The taller man entered first, Riley Knox, unmistakable. He was in his late 30s, clean-shaven, square-jawed, with pale eyes that never blinked. His face was carved from stone, his movements efficient and unhesitating. A deep scar ran down his forearm, an old burn, maybe a reminder of another life. Nathan fired once. Knox ducked, the bullet shattering a light fixture. "We don't want you, deputy," Knox said evenly, leveling a tranquilizer rifle. "We just want the asset." Luna lunged, teeth bared, but the second man fired a dart before she could reach him. She yelped once, staggering. The sound tore through Nathan like glass. "No!" He rushed forward, but another dart hissed past, embedding in his sleeve. Grace threw herself over Scout, shielding the pup with her body. Luna collapsed, her breathing slowing. Ash barked frantically, pressing against her muzzle, but one of the men scooped him up, tossing the struggling pup into a black carrier. Knox gestured to his partner. "Secure the mother. Move." They lifted Luna's limp body onto a stretcher, the tranquilizer already dulling her heartbeat. Nathan tried to stand, his vision swimming. "You'll never get away with this," he rasped. Knox gave him a cold half-smile. "We already have." The last thing Nathan saw before darkness swallowed him was Scout trembling in Grace's arms, the pup's wide eyes reflecting the broken light, a spark of fear and something fiercer underneath. Then the men vanished into the storm, their footsteps fading into silence. When Nathan woke hours later, the substation was in ruins. Broken glass, overturned furniture, the bitter scent of chemicals lingering in the air. Grace sat against the wall, holding Scout tightly. tears streaking her soot-stained cheeks. "They took her," she whispered. "Luna and Ash. They took them." Nathan pushed himself upright, blood pounding in his ears. The wind howled outside, shaking the windows like a warning. He met Grace's eyes, his voice low, steady, burning. "Then we get them back." Snow swept across the peaks of 10 Peaks Mountain like restless ghosts, whirling through the air in silver spirals. The morning sky hung low and bruised, clouds pressing down on the frozen wilderness. Deputy Nathan Hale gripped the steering wheel of his truck, jaw tight, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Beside him sat Grace McConnell, her auburn hair pulled under a wool cap, face pale from sleeplessness. In her lap, Scout, the smaller of Luna's pups, lay trembling but alert, his pale fur twitching whenever the truck hit a bump. The hum of the engine filled the silence between them, broken only by the distant creak of ice settling along the cliffs. They had been driving for hours, following the coordinates extracted from the recovered drone's hard drive, the last piece of evidence that might lead them to Luna and Ash. The coordinates pointed to an abandoned silver mine hidden deep within the 10 Peaks range, a place long forgotten since the town's industrial collapse 2 decades ago. Grace's fingers drummed nervously against the dash. "You realize what this means," she said softly. "If the data's accurate, they've moved the entire Genix Tech field unit underground." Nathan nodded without looking at her. "All the better to hide what they're doing." The road narrowed into a path half buried under snow. He switched off the headlights, driving slow. "You sure you're ready for this?" Grace gave a faint, humorless smile. "I was part of the monster once, Nathan. Maybe it's time I help kill it." They parked behind a line of frost-bitten pines. From here, the old mine entrance was barely visible, a black wound in the mountainside guarded by 2 armed men in dark tactical gear. One was tall and broad, face hidden under a balaclava. The other was younger, lean, and clean-shaven, his breath fogging faintly in the cold. Their posture screamed discipline. Nathan scanned the area through his binoculars. "They're military-trained," he murmured. "Not locals." Grace's hand went to the tranquilizer pistol strapped to her thigh. 2 guards outside means a dozen inside. "Then we go quiet," Nathan said. "No heroics." They slipped through the trees, moving low, the snow muffling their steps. Scout stayed tucked inside Grace's coat, his tiny head poking out just enough to sniff the air. When one of the guards stepped away to check the perimeter, Nathan crept forward, his movements sharp and practiced. Years of training resurfaced like muscle memory. He swung his arm fast, slamming the butt of his pistol into the man's helmet. The body hit the ground with a soft thud. Grace pulled the second guard's attention by tossing a stone to the right, then shot a tranquilizer dart into his neck. The man crumpled before he could radio. "You're good at this," Nathan muttered. "You forget," Grace whispered. "I was trained to patch soldiers after they got shot. I just learned how to make sure they never needed patching again." Inside the mine, the air changed. Colder, sharper, filled with the metallic scent of rust and ozone. Lights flickered along the rock walls, powered by portable generators. The deeper they went, the more unnatural it became. The tunnel opened into a wide, subterranean chamber, its floor covered in cables and steel cages. Inside, some of them were shadows. Dogs, sedated or trembling, their eyes glowing faintly under the fluorescent light. On the walls hung laminated signs reading, "Neural Sync Prototype, Property of Genix Tech." Grace's breath caught. "Oh my God," she whispered. They continued Project Guardian, but modified it. "Look, new tags, new iteration numbers." Nathan moved closer to one of the cages and froze. Luna lay inside, chained at the neck, her fur streaked with frost and blood. But her eyes, those burning amber eyes, were alive, fierce, and locked on him the moment he stepped into view. "Luna," he breathed. The dog let out a low growl. Not at him, but at the 2 guards patrolling near the back wall. Her muscles tensed, tail stiff. Grace crouched by a nearby console, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "They're monitoring her vitals in real time," she said. "She's been sedated, but not fully. Nathan, there's a secondary neural loop. They're testing her empathy triggers." Before Nathan could respond, Scout wriggled free from Grace's jacket and bounded toward Luna, yelping. The sound made Luna jerk upright, straining against her chain. One of the guards turned, startled. "What the—" He moved toward the pup, rifle raised. Nathan acted on instinct. He lunged, tackling the man into the ground. The second guard swung his weapon, firing a burst into the ceiling. The shot echoed through the chamber, showering sparks. Alarms blared. Red lights flooded the mine. "So much for quiet," Grace muttered, slamming a button that unlocked the nearby cages. Luna's chain snapped with a metallic shriek. She lunged forward, slamming into the nearest guard, teeth sinking into his arm. He screamed, dropping his weapon. Scout darted beneath Luna's legs, barking wildly. Another cage burst open. Two more dogs, both German shepherds with tracking scars, stumbled free, confused but alive. Nathan grabbed the fallen rifle and covered Grace as she ripped open a data server near the console. "This is it," she said breathlessly, pulling out a glowing blue drive. "The archive for Project G12, Empathic Defense Response. They weren't training for attack, they were stimulating the part of the brain that triggers protection instincts. They were trying to create perfect guardians." She glanced at Nathan. "But they didn't care what it did to the dogs." A thunderous explosion cut her words short. The far tunnel collapsed in a rain of stone and dust. "They're sealing the exits," Nathan shouted. "Move!" Grace pocketed the drive and ran after him, Luna and Scout close behind. From deeper inside the mine came the roar of engines and shouts of soldiers. They sprinted toward the old elevator shaft, the only remaining path to daylight. As they reached the lift, a slab of rock split from the ceiling, crashing down between them and the dogs. Nathan shoved Grace out of the way, shielding her with his body. "Go," he yelled. "Get to the surface." "Not without you," she shouted back. Then Luna barked, a deep, commanding sound that cut through the chaos. She turned, saw another section of the ceiling cracking above them. Ash appeared suddenly from the shadows, filthy, shaking, but alive, dragged by his collar from a broken crate. Luna whined, nudging him toward the others. The noise of collapsing stone grew deafening. Grace tried to reach for them, but a fresh burst of falling ice blocked her path. Luna moved fast, pressing her body against the rock wall, pushing both pups under the low gap. Nathan saw what she was doing. "No!" he shouted, scrambling toward her, but it was too late. The ceiling gave way. The last thing Nathan saw was Luna's eyes, glowing gold through the dust as she threw herself beneath the falling ice. The crash swallowed everything. When Nathan came to, he was outside, half buried in snow. Grace knelt beside him, her face streaked with soot, clutching Scout and Ash to her chest. The entrance to the mine was gone, buried beneath tons of rock and ice. "She saved us," Grace whispered. Nathan stared at the collapsed mountain, his throat tight. The wind howled through the pines, carrying echoes from below, soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat fading beneath the earth. "She's still down there," he said. "She's alive." Grace looked at him, her expression somewhere between grief and disbelief. "Nathan." "We're not done," he said, voice hoarse but steady. "Not until she's home." Dawn broke over the mountains of Silver Ridge like a promise fulfilled. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape remade, snow glittering beneath the soft gold of sunrise, the wind calm at last. The mine at 10 Peaks was now surrounded by flashing lights and the low hum of engines. Black SUVs and armored trucks lined the ridge as agents moved between them, their dark coats flapping like ravens' wings in the cold air. The mountain had given up its secret. Deputy Nathan Hale stood a few yards from the collapsed entrance, his breath clouding in the frigid air. His face was pale, dust still clinging to his jacket, his hair streaked with frost. The exhaustion written in every line of his body was softened by a single look. Hope? He had been there all night, digging through the debris until the rescue team forced him back. FBI Special Agent Laura Beckett approached from behind, clipboard in hand. She was a woman in her early 40s, sharp-featured with light brown skin and sleek black hair tied back in a tight bun. Her expression was one of composed authority, the kind that came from years of holding her ground against powerful men and darker truths. "You're lucky to be alive, Deputy," she said quietly, eyes flicking toward the mine. "Your dog bought you that luck." Nathan didn't respond. He looked at the mound of rock and ice, his throat tight. Then a shout came from one of the rescue workers below. "We've got movement." Beckett turned sharply. "Get medics down there." The agents swarmed, clearing debris, and moments later a figure emerged, muddy, bloodied, trembling, but alive. Grace McConnell, her face streaked with tears and soot, stumbled forward, clutching a limp, frost-covered body in her arms. It was Luna. Her fur was matted with blood and ash, but her chest still rose, faint and shallow. Grace's voice was hoarse. "She's alive. We have to move now." The next hours blurred into white lights and sirens. Grace worked tirelessly beside the medical team inside a makeshift tent. Her hands moved with the same certainty they once had in the field, stitching wounds, steadying breaths, refusing to let go. Dr. Rowan Ellis, the field surgeon called in by the Bureau, assisted her, a grizzled man in his 50s, tall and gray-bearded, with the slow, patient eyes of someone who had seen enough death to recognize when a miracle was unfolding. "She's strong," he murmured, "stronger than anything I've seen." Grace only nodded, sweat beading her temples. "She's more than strong," she whispered. "She's loyal." Outside, Nathan waited, Scout and Ash curled up against his boots for warmth. The pups had refused to leave the tent entrance, whining softly each time the wind shifted. He reached down, rubbing their heads gently, eyes never leaving the flickering lights within. Every minute felt like a lifetime. When Grace finally stepped out, her gloves soaked red and her face drawn with fatigue, Nathan stood. "She'll make it," Grace said, voice trembling. "Her ribs are cracked, leg broken, but she's breathing on her own. She'll need time, but she'll live." Nathan's breath left him in a shuddering exhale. "You did it." "No," Grace said softly. She did. By noon, the storm clouds had scattered. From the highway came the distant whir of helicopters, FBI units and state investigators converging on the site. Beckett approached again, her tone crisp. "We've detained every surviving Genix Tech operative. Knox and his team are in custody. Their data servers are being confiscated. What we found down there—" She shook her head, exhaling slowly. "It's going to shake more than a few agencies." Nathan studied her face. "What about the others? The dogs?" Beckett's eyes softened slightly. "The surviving canines will be transferred to rehabilitation centers. The Bureau will shut down the Neural Sync program permanently. And you—" She paused, handing him an envelope. Inside was a commendation, the Medal of Valor. "You deserve this, Hale." Nathan looked down at the medal, its bronze surface glinting in the light, then back at Beckett. "With respect, ma'am," he said quietly. "The ones who deserve this can't wear it." He glanced toward the tent where Luna lay sleeping beside her pups. Beckett studied him for a moment, then smiled faintly. Not many would turn that down. "Not many met a hero like her," he said. Weeks passed. The snow began to melt, revealing soft earth and the first signs of spring. The scars of the storm still marked the town, the broken signs, the splintered fences, but life had returned to Silver Ridge. The people spoke often of what happened on 10 Peaks, of the miracle dog, who had saved lives and exposed secrets buried in the dark. Luna's story spread far beyond the town, first in the papers, then on television, then in the hearts of those who needed to believe in loyalty again. Nathan stood one afternoon outside a small wooden building just beyond the edge of town. The sign above the door read Haven Paws Sanctuary. The paint was still fresh, the walls newly built from reclaimed timber. Inside, several kennels lined the walls, each occupied by retired service dogs, injured strays, or animals rescued from defunct training programs. Grace walked beside him, her lab coat replaced with a faded sweater and jeans. She moved with a quiet grace, the faintest limp from the injury she'd sustained in the mine. Her auburn hair caught the light, and for the first time in years, Nathan saw her smile freely. "Hard to believe, isn't it?" she said softly. "A few months ago, we were digging through snow and gunfire. Now we're building something that matters." Nathan looked around at the sanctuary. The smell of sawdust, the sound of soft barking, the warmth filling what once had been an empty warehouse. "It matters more than medals," he said. At the far end of the room, Luna rested on a thick wool blanket, one leg bandaged but healing. Scout and Ash played nearby, tumbling over each other in the sunlight streaming through the window. Luna lifted her head when Nathan approached, tail thumping once against the floor. He knelt beside her, scratching gently behind her ear. "You did it, girl," he whispered. "You brought us home." Her amber eyes met his, calm and knowing. Later that evening, the sky turned gold and lavender, the snow along the ridge glowing like silver fire. Nathan walked the forest path behind the sanctuary, Luna at his side, her gait slow but steady. The pups bounded ahead, chasing the last snowflakes. Grace followed a few paces behind, hands in her pockets, watching them with quiet affection. The scent of pine and thawing earth filled the air. Somewhere in the distance, a hawk cried, the sound fading into peace. Nathan stopped by the tree line and looked toward the horizon, the place where mountains met sky. He took a deep breath, feeling the cold fade into warmth. "You know," he said softly, glancing at Luna, "there are storms that come to destroy everything we know." He paused, kneeling to rest a hand on her head. "But some storms." He smiled faintly. "Some come to show us who still stands beside us when it's over." Luna leaned into his touch, eyes closing. Grace joined them, her hand brushing his shoulder. Together, they watched the sun break through the last of the clouds, its light spilling over the valley like a benediction. In that quiet, with the world washed clean and life beginning again, the echoes of pain finally fell silent. What remained was something purer: trust, love, and the quiet certainty that even in the coldest storms, loyalty could outlast everything else. There are moments in life when storms feel endless, when loss, fear, and silence seem to swallow all light. But sometimes God sends his miracles not with thunder or wings, but with fur, with loyalty, and eyes that never give up on love. Luna's story reminds us that faith still walks among us, through kindness, courage, and the simple act of standing beside someone in need. If this story touched your heart, please share it with those who believe in second chances. Leave a comment with your thoughts and don't forget to subscribe, so together we can keep spreading stories of hope and compassion. May God bless you, your family, and every loyal heart that still believes in miracles.